What if I told you? The Minnesota Vikings are one decision away from completely changing their identity tonight, and almost nobody is talking about the one player who could make it happen. Because as the draft board starts to fall, there's a scenario developing that could give this offense something it hasn't had in years. And if it happens, everything changes. Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you might be the most important draft projection you'll see before the Vikings go on the clock. Before continuing, click the like button and write in the comments, "Go Vikings!" Something unexpected is quietly taking shape behind the scenes of the Minnesota Vikings draft room. And if you've been following the noise, the rumors, the endless speculation, you might be missing the one detail that actually matters. Because as draft day finally arrives, there's a growing sense that the Vikings are not just reacting to the board, they're preparing to dictate it. And what unfolded in this final full 7-round projection may be the clearest signal yet of how aggressive, calculated, and creative this front office is ready to be. We've waited through the entire offseason for this moment. Every mock, every debate, every late-night scenario, it all comes down to this. And as the clock ticks toward the first pick, there's one name that keeps rising above the rest in this projection: Kenyon Sadiq. If he's there at pick 18, the decision might not just be easy. It might redefine how this offense operates in 2026. Think about what this offense already has: Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. Now imagine inserting a tight end who isn't just reliable, but a true mismatch nightmare. That's exactly how Sadiq is being described internally in this simulation. A player who can stretch the field, dominate underneath, and thrive in a system that already leans heavily into creative formations and screen-heavy concepts. Coming out of Oregon, where he was heavily utilized in space, Sadiq fits eerily well into Kevin O'Connell's vision. And here's where it gets even more interesting. The Vikings aren't just thinking about adding talent. They're thinking about identity. There's a clear emphasis here on 12 personnel, 2 tight ends, multiple looks, constant pressure on opposing defenses to guess wrong. The idea of pairing Sadiq with the current offensive weapons opens up a completely different playbook, one that forces defenses into uncomfortable matchups snap after snap. But the tension doesn't stop there, because sitting on the same board is another intriguing option: Dylan Thiemann. And the twist? There's a strong belief that whichever player Minnesota passes on at 18 could immediately be scooped up by the Carolina Panthers at 19. This isn't just about making the right pick. It's about making the right pick knowing your alternative might instantly become someone else's weapon. Still, in this projection, the choice is made. Kenyon Sadiq becomes the cornerstone of this draft class, and potentially a foundational piece of the Vikings' offensive evolution. Now, shift your focus to pick 49, because this is where things start to reveal the broader strategy. The Vikings aren't just stacking offense, they're balancing the roster with precision. And the name that stands out here is Trayden Stokes, a versatile defensive back with elite speed, clocking a 4.3 in the 40-yard dash, and the kind of flexibility that fits perfectly into Brian Flores' defensive schemes. This isn't just a value pick, it's a statement. If Stokes is still on the board at 49, it's seen as a near-perfect scenario. A player who can move across the secondary, adapt to different roles, and immediately contribute in a system that thrives on unpredictability and pressure. What's unfolding here is a draft approach that feels deliberate, calculated, almost surgical. Offense gets a dynamic new weapon. Defense gets speed and versatility. And all of it is happening without overreaching or forcing the board. And we're only getting started. Because once you move into the 3rd round and beyond, the Vikings begin addressing depth protection, and long-term development. And some of those names might surprise you even more. But before we go deeper into how the rest of this class comes together, I want to hear from you. If you're on the clock at pick 18 and both Kenyon Sadiq and Dylan Thiemann are available, who are you taking and why? Drop your take in the comments, because this decision might define the entire direction of the Vikings season. And this is where the Vikings strategy starts to reveal something even deeper. Because after landing Kenyon Sadiq and Tradon Stokes, the front office doesn't panic, doesn't reach, they stay disciplined, and that might be the most dangerous part of this entire projection. As we move into the third round, the conversation shifts from star power to structure. This is where good drafts become great ones, and the Vikings zero in on a position that has quietly been a long-term question mark: the interior offensive line. The name that comes off the board here is Jake Slaughter, a center out of Florida. And this pick might not generate headlines, but it could be one of the most important moves in this entire class. Slaughter is described as a player who moves extremely well, fits the system, and has the tools to develop into a reliable anchor in the middle of the offensive line. And if you think about what Minnesota is building, a more dynamic, timing-based offense with multiple weapons, having stability at center becomes critical. This isn't just about protection, it's about execution, rhythm, and consistency on every snap. But the Vikings don't stop there. Shortly after, they double down on defense again. And this is where things get really interesting. Instead of forcing a flashy pick, they stay patient and land Kyle Lewis, a linebacker who brings versatility and a skill set that mirrors the modern defensive chess piece. The comparison thrown around? A potential Josh Metellus-type impact. That means flexibility, intelligence, and the ability to line up in multiple spots, depending on the situation. At this point in the draft, you can start to see the identity forming. This isn't a team just collecting talent. This is a roster being shaped to fit very specific schemes on both sides of the ball. Then comes round 5, and the Vikings finally address the defensive interior with Zay Durant, a player who's already been studied and evaluated closely, known for his strength and ability to contribute on the interior defensive line. It may not be the boldest pick, but it fills a clear need, and it continues the theme of building depth in key areas. Now, here's where things take a slight turn, because in round 6, the Vikings take a shot. Jeff Caldwell enters the picture, a wide receiver described as a big-body, fast, can-move type of player. This is the kind of late-round swing that can quietly become one of the steals of the draft if it hits. And then, the final rounds. This is where drafts usually fade out, where names blur together. But not here. The Vikings use their final picks to take calculated flyers, and there's a sense of personality in these selections. Damani Jackson is brought in as a developmental corner, a player with traits worth betting on despite inconsistencies on tape. Then comes Jam Miller at running back, a pick that, while partly fueled by instinct, and even something as simple as the name test, still fills a depth need in the backfield. And finally, Squirrel White. Yes, that's the name, and it might be the most intriguing late-round gamble of them all. There's talk of elite speed, even whispers of a 4.28 40-yard dash. This is the kind of pick that costs you nothing, but could give you everything if it hits. When you step back and look at the full picture, something becomes very clear. This draft isn't about one superstar. It's about building a complete, adaptable, and dangerous roster. The core 4, Sadiq, Stokes, Slaughter, and Lewis, form a foundation. The mid to late round picks add depth, upside, and competition. Even the grading reflects that balance. A strong start, some questioned decisions, but overall a solid B grade, with the potential to look much better in hindsight, depending on development. And maybe that's the biggest takeaway here. This draft class doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't rely on hype. It quietly builds something that could be far more impactful over time, if these players develop the way this projection believes they can. Now, I want to hear from you, Vikings fans, looking at this entire class, from Kenyon Sadiq all the way down to Squirrel White. Do you believe this kind of draft would put Minnesota in a position to compete right away? Or is this more about building for the future? And if you enjoyed breaking this all down, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay locked in, because draft night is just getting started. Go Vikings!